Gopijanavallabha Girivanadhari Gopijanavallabha Girivanadhari This is one. Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijanavallabha Girivanadhari Gopijanavallabha Girivanadhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Primsikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Ghora Bhaktavirinda Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so today is the divine disappearance day of Srila Lokanath Goswami, so I'll say a little bit in this regard before getting into the Bhagavatam verse for the day. So, as we know, Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I can go through my Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatah Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhavitam Savadutam Parirana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vashankan Vitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Tinabando Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kantana Gaurangi Radhe Varandavanishvari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvyeva Cha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pershtaya Putale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namani Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pershtaya Putale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Ghora Bhaktavirinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, now I'll get into speaking a little bit on Srila Lokanath Goswami. Just in brief, so we recite daily the Guru Vandana prayers, and we know that this was composed by Narottam Das Thakur, and he's singing to his own spiritual master, who is Lokanath Goswami. So it's described in this book devotees often read from Sri Chaitanya and his life and his associates, that Lokanath Goswami is considered to be Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's direct disciple and associate. Prior to coming to Navadvip, he lived in the village of Takari in the Jessore district of present-day Bangladesh. Prior to that, he resided in Kanchrapar. His father's name was Padmanabha Chakravarti, and his mother was Sita Devi. This is confirmed in the Bhakti Ratnakara. Srimad Radha Vinodhaika Seva Sampat Samanvitam Padmanabhatmajam Srimal Lokanath Prabhum Bhaje. I worship Lokanath Prabhu, the son of Padmanabha, whose life revolved around the wealth of service he possessed to his deity Radha Vinod. So it's described that Lokanath Goswami was an exalted personality, and the Lord personally comes before him and directly gives him instruction. He immediately tells him to go to Vrindavan. It's described that Lokanath Goswami renounced the householder ashram in 1510 or 1431 of the Shaka era and came to meet Sriman Mahaprabhu in Navadvip. Mahaprabhu immediately told him to go and live in Vrindavan, saying to him that it was his own intention to take sannyas very shortly and go there himself. So, It's described that Lokanath started to cry when he imagined the Lord with his beautiful curls shorn and the distress the devotees would feel at his departure. When the Lord saw Lokanath's anxiety, he embraced him and consoled him with various spiritual instructions, and Lokanath surrendered completely to him. When Bhukarba saw how unhappy Lokanath was, this is a close friend of Lokanath Goswami, he decided to accompany him to Vrindavan. The two companions walked through Rajmahal, Tajpur, Puraniya, Lucknow, and many holy places before finally arriving in Vraja. So, though he had come to Vrindavan on Mahaprabhu's order, Lokanath constantly felt intense separation from the Lord and shed copious tears in his desire to see him again. When he received the news that Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas and gone to Puri, and from there to the south on pilgrimage, Lokanath hurried to southern India in order to join him. When he arrived in the south, he heard that Mahaprabhu was no longer there, but had gone to Vrindavan. Lokanath immediately set off for Vrindavan, hoping to see the Lord there. But by the time he arrived, he heard that the Lord had gone to Prayag. Disappointed, but still determined to see the Lord, Lokanath decided to set off once again for Prayag. So, this time, however, Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream and told Lokanath to stop moving about and remain in Vrindavan to perform his bhajan. Not long afterwards, Rupa, Sanatan, and Gopala Bhatta Goswamis and other associates of the Lord started to come live in Vraja. Their association brought Lokanath immense joy. So this, as previously mentioned in this Bhakti Ratnakara verse, this Radha, his deity Radha Vinod, upon performing bhajan at Kishore Kund or Kishore Lake, the Lord, upon seeing his intense desire to serve him, personally comes and delivers his deity Radha Vinod for him to perform worship to. It's described that Lokanath Goswami constantly traveled throughout Vraja, ecstatically visiting the various holy places where Krishna had engaged in his pastimes. Once he went to Kadiravan, then he visited Kishore Kund near the village of Umarao by Chatravan. He was so impressed by the beauty of the site that he stayed there for some time to do his bhajan in isolation. After being absorbed in Nam bhajan for some time, Lokanath developed a deep desire to worship Radha and Krishna in their deity form. The Lord knows the desires of his devotees and feels himself obliged to fulfill them. He thus came personally to give Lokanath a deity, telling him before disappearing that his name was Radha Vinod. Lokanath's first reaction was astonishment at seeing the deity, but then he became filled with anxiety at the thought that the Lord himself had just come and gone. But Radha Vinod cast his sweet glance on Lokanath and said to him, "I have been living here in this village of Umarao on the banks of Kishore Kund. I saw your eagerness to serve me and so came here on my own. Who else but me could have brought me to you? Now I am very hungry, so quickly prepare something for me to eat." When Lokanath heard these words, tears began to flow from his eyes. He quickly started cooking for Radha Vinod and then made an offering that the deity ate with great satisfaction. Lokanath then made Radha Vinod a bed of flowers upon which he placed him, fanned with branches, and joyfully massaged his feet. Thenceforward, Lokanath devoted himself to Radha Vinod in body, mind, and soul. And then later describes how he had such great attachment to serving Radha Vinod that he had constructed a home, which was like a bag that he wore around his neck and carried with him everywhere. And upon being offered to, I'll just read from this section because it's towards the end of the paragraph. Wearing that bag around his neck, he was able to keep his worshipable deity close to his heart like a necklace. When they saw the affectionate relationship between Lokanath and his Lord, the people of Vraja were attracted to him and asked if they could build a house for him and Radha Vinod. But Lokanath refused. His spirit of renunciation was so strong that he declined to accept anything but what he absolutely needed for the deity's service. So, such an extreme level of renunciation, we see that he's not even willing to accept any sort of bodily comfort. Only what's necessary so that he can continue to serve Radha Vinod. And then it's described that Lokanath Goswami, he left this world somewhere around 1510 Shaka or 158, I think it's 1588, it says AD, on the 8th day of the dark moon in the month of Asṛjat. I'm assuming this is quite auspicious, even though I don't know anything about astrology. His Samadhi tomb is found in the Radha Gokulananda temple in Vrindavan. His beloved Radha Vinod Didi continues to be served in that same temple. It's also described that Lokanath Goswami in Krishna Lila is known as Lila Manjari. Also something I'm not qualified to speak on. So, Srila Lokanath Goswami ki jai. Okay. So today I'll be covering chapter 12, text 3. Someone casting? Okay. Okay, we'll go through the word for word. dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ na ātmānam bahu amanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasā anyām tataḥ asṛjat dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ amanyata nātmānaṁ amanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ amanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat. Please repeat. dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ ātmānam amanyata
dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ bhavamanyata
bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat
dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ bhavamanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat
dṛṣṭvā
pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ bhavamanyata Mataji's. dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭiṁ nātmānaṁ bhavamanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat dṛṣṭvā, by seeing, pāpīyasīṁ, sinful, sṛṣṭiṁ, creation, na, did not, ātmānam, unto himself, bahu, much pleasure, amanyata, felt, bhagavad, on the personality of Godhead, dhyāna, meditation, pūtena, purified by that, manasā, by such a mentality, anyām, another, tataḥ, thereafter, asṛjat, created. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahmā did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation. Purport. Although he created the different influences of nescience, Lord Brahmā was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task, but he had to do it because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be so. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad-gītā 15:15 that he is present in everyone's heart and is helping everyone to either remember or forget. The question may be raised why the Lord, who is all-merciful, helps one to remember and another to forget. Actually, his mercy is not exhibited in partiality towards one and an enmity towards another. The living entity, as part and parcel of the Lord, is partially independent because he partially possesses all the qualities of the Lord. Anyone who has some independence may sometimes misuse it due to ignorance. When the living entity prefers to misuse his independence and glide down towards nescience, the all-merciful Lord first of all tries to protect him from the trap, but when the living entity persists in gliding down to hell, the Lord helps him to forget his real position. The Lord helps the falling living entity glide down to the lowest point just to give him the chance to see if he is happy by misusing his independence. Almost all the conditioned souls who are rotting in the material world are misusing their independence, and therefore 5 kinds of nescience are imposed upon them. As an obedient servitor of the Lord, Brahmā creates all these as a matter of necessity, but he is not happy in doing so because a devotee of the Lord naturally does not like to see anyone falling down from his real position. Persons who do not care for the path of realization get full facilities from the Lord for executing their proclivities to the fullest extent, and Brahmā helps in that procedure without fail. So, one thing I wanted to point out, dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭvā, well, I'll just go over the Sanskrit again. dṛṣṭvā pāpīyasīṁ sṛṣṭvā nātmānaṁ amanyata bhagavad-dhyāna-pūtena manasānyāṁ tato sṛjat. So, Lord Brahmā sees this creation of his, these 5 kinds of nescience. It's described that he sees it as a sinful task, but he sees it as sinful despite the fact that he's following the will of the Supreme Lord. He's a pure devotee, and the pure devotee, of course, it is understood that their heart is completely and totally free from material contamination, and the Lord is especially present in their heart. And while he's present in the heart of every living entity, the pure devotee is able to understand the desires of the Supreme Lord. So even still, nevertheless, the Lord Brahmā, despite the fact that he's carrying out the direct order of the Supreme Lord after he's appeared to him, he still feels that this is somewhat sinful. And it can only be explained that this is because of Lord Brahmā's compassion, that of which he has for the living entity. Just as Ali Krishna Prabhu had covered the other day about how, as it says in the purport, it's not like he gets some grand amount of joy from doing this, but he does it out of necessity because the Lord told him to do so. In the purport, it's described that as an obedient servitor of the Lord, Brahmā creates all these as a matter of necessity, but he is not happy in doing so because a devotee of the Lord naturally does not like to see anyone falling down from his real position. The general principle, of course, in our philosophy is that everything should be done for the pleasure of the Lord. And when we see this here, one could easily start to question, well, how could this possibly bring the Lord any sort of pleasure? It seems that he's just creating some facilities by which the living entity will just continue to forget Krishna. So Lord Brahmā is feeling like this. And this compassion that he has is such an important quality that we cultivate as Vaishnavas. I don't have very much compassion at all. I've noticed, especially going out on books, I have just like the slightest bit of frustration, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and engage with these people anymore, especially if they're Christians. There was a point in time where somebody told me, like, if they even started to say the first syllable of Krishna, I was already walking away. I'm like, okay, they don't want it. Why should I go ahead and push myself to give this great philosophy and give the association of a pure devotee to them? But that compassion should be there, and we should understand that people are ultimately acting out of their conditioning with the material nature. And of course, that takes some realization. Philosophically, we may understand this, but sometimes when we're combated with Maya, it's at least hard for me to remember this. So this compassion is increasingly important for us to have. It's described that Lord Brahmā did not feel much pleasure in this activity. And what makes this amazing is that the pleasure that one gets, well, the devotee doesn't consider his own pleasure in carrying out devotional service, because again, the chief thing that is of most importance is the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So he's able to put that aside and understand that this is my duty, and therefore I'll carry it out. And this is a standard that of which we should strive to reach, this anyābhilāshitā shunyam, being completely devoid of material desires, and using every facility that we have to serve Krishna. Again, in the Guru Vandana prayers, it's the second line of this. Anyways, arna koryo maneyash, it's being completely devoid of any sort of other desires, only one to serve Krishna. This is ultimately the platform that of which we should strive to reach. And we see that Lord Brahmā is on it. So, again, he doesn't feel pleasure, but still he has to carry out this, as he describes it, a sinful activity. And why should one want to rise this platform? I mean, because the understanding is that by association with the material modes of nature, there's contamination that comes as a result of that. And this is another part of Lord Brahmā's thankless task, is that he's having to create all these things, and he's creating the very things that of which he's also in the material world, he's also subject to these things. And he prays that he never forgets, that he never gets falsely puffed up in his position and always remembers his servitude to Krishna, so he's not also bewildered, in creating the very facilities for the bewilderment of the other living entities. So we see this, again, this material contamination, of course, it's ranging from more subtle to more gross, as has also been previously described. As we went over, I think it was the Visions of Creation's previous chapter, we see things going from more subtle to more gross, not just in activity, but also, of course, in the description of the elements from the universal creation. So again, there's just wide range of, there's so many means by which we can become contaminated by material nature. Krishna says in Bhagavad-gītā 7:15, you can pull this up, I believe it's namam duskritino mudha prapadyante, what's the naradmaha mayaya pahrita jnana asaram bhavam asṛitaha. So those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So again, those who are grossly foolish, those who have engaged in some activities that facilitate their forgetfulness of Krishna, the forgetfulness of servitude to Krishna. The amazing thing in all this is that, as it's described in the Purport, the Lord assists in all endeavors. If you want to use, again, we try to make the best use of a bad bargain being here in the material world. But the thing is that if we want to use for example, our phones, of course, to engage in some level of sense gratification and guide ourselves slowly away from devotional service. The facility, of course, is there, and of course, if we want to use our phone, for example, to memorize shlokas or read Bhagavatam, associate with devotees, that is also there. So the Lord assists in this manner in all endeavors, and in this way, He's not partial towards any of the living entities. He assists Lord Brahmā in the creation of the material world. He assists the demonic living entities who want to again use the material energy in order to forget Him, and then He also assists the devotees by giving them means by which they can come to love and serve Him as well. So, again, it's described that Lord Brahmā was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task, but he had to do it because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be so. One thing that stood out to me is that it's stated that it's because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be so. But on what authority do the conditioned souls have? I mean, that Lord Brahmā would carry out anything they request, especially that which is only going to further facilitate sense gratification. Why would He carry out this task if, just because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be so? Prabhupada, of course, has given us the understanding, and I know this has been a widely kind of get into this realm of like, okay, how did the jiva initially fall from the spiritual world if he's a purely Brahman, and how did this all come about, and it just doesn't add up. And Prabhupada, of course, has driven home multiple times that the jiva's original constitutional position is one of servitude to the Lord, and in that pure position, he's full of knowledge, which means he's cognizant of his servitude to the Supreme Lord. Again, coming from Krishna, we come as pure, but the minute we start to associate with this material nature, again, there's this immediate contamination. So we had this knowledge, or we have this knowledge of our constitutional position, but ultimately the forgetfulness of the living entity and his position as the Lord's marginal energy comes from being overpowered by that inferior energy of the Lord. Which is, again, why Prabhupada always makes the point that this is not a matter of converting people just like you convert Christians and Muslims and whatnot. This is education of the spirit soul, because this is all knowledge that of which is innate, and helping us to remember that eternal occupation, dharma, that which cannot be changed. So ultimately, this answers that question and gives us the understanding how this education that we're getting, of course, is nothing new, but by association with this material world for so long, it feels like completely and totally foreign to us. The idea of giving up, gratifying our own senses to completely devote ourselves to God. People are generally completely and totally averse to it, especially in this age. Excuse me. So, again, to this point, I was bringing up about why why Lord Brahmā carries it out, just because most of the conditioned souls want it to be so. Well, ultimately, Krishna is still fulfilling the desires of every living entity, and that's the answer. Is that we desired it, and therefore He gave it to us. And as it says in the purport, that Krishna will assist one in his gliding down to the lowest point in order for him to realize that he's actually not enjoying it all. And in this, if he's properly using his intelligence, he'll come back to the service of the Lord and realize that I should actually just give up all this nonsense because it's not actually bringing me any real sort of pleasure. So, going back or going on. So Lord Brahmā, he's in his creation again. He's seeing all this and he's again, not pleased, but he's again even though he's carrying this out, he sees all living entities with this equal vision. This is the vision of the Uttamadhikari. So this compassion that they have for all living entities irregardless of what sort of body one is taken. Being able to see that everyone is initially in this constitutional position. No one wants to rob any living entity of realizing that. I just started reading Ramayana, actually, so I still haven't read it in full, but I just had come to the point where before Valmiki receives the instruction to compose the Ramayana from Lord Brahmā, it's described that he comes across a Nishada hunter who kills these two cranes. I believe they're in the middle of copulating. And upon seeing this, he's moved to great compassion. I'll read from here. It's just a small excerpt. When Valmiki witnessed this tragic scene, feelings of great compassion welled up within his breast. Considering the Nishada's violent act to be extremely sinful, Valmiki became angry and cursed the hunter, saying, "O killer of birds, as punishment for your heartless murder of an innocent creature engaged in gratifying his mate, may you never find peace of mind for endless years." So we see that from this compassion comes great anger, which he exhibits in the form of cursing this hunter. And however, then just after he does this, he feels a great amount of shame for having become a victim of his uncontrolled anger. And it says that indeed, as an enlightened soul, he knew that all living beings are acting helplessly under the influence of material nature. Thus, he regretted retaliating against the hunter. So, this same compassion that we see exhibited here by Valmiki is no different from this compassion that Lord Brahmā is feeling for the living entities. Of course, one could wonder, how could this possibly be beneficial for anybody? And it's, again, just to quote once more, that when the living entity prefers to misuse his independence and glide down towards nescience, the all-merciful Lord, first of all, tries to protect him from the trap, and when the living entity persists in gliding down, he helps him to forget that same position. And can you pull up Bhagavad-gītā 7:16, please? It stated that, O best among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. So in one sense, we could say that the kickings of Maya can be the Lord's mercy if one, upon being kicked hard enough, starts to realize that they're not actually enjoying the material world. And we see this, and according to how hard and what manner and direction one has been kicked, they come, if they're pious, to the Supreme Lord in search of freedom, in search of solution to their anxiety, wealth, satisfaction of their questions and inquiries. I'm sorry, and knowledge ultimately. So Krishna is all merciful, and no one can possibly supersede him in this right. Even though we came to the material world in the hopes of enjoying separate from Krishna, we still can't escape him because we're moving, of course, as it was described in just the previous chapter, this element of time. We're always directly, not only is Krishna, of course, accompanying every jiva as a super soul, but whether we like it or not, we're all slave to this element of time. So you can't escape him. You can't cheat him. You can't supersede him. We can never replace him. Krishna is ultimately the greatest cheater. And it's quite amazing, let's say. There's a verse in this connection. Anejade kam manasoja viyo nainad devam apnavam purvam arshad tad Dyavato jnana tyati tishtad tasmin napo matarishva dadati, that the Lord is swifter than the mind. He can overcome all others running. None of the demigods can reach him. He controls those who supply the wind and the rain, and no one can ever excel him or go beyond him in his excellence. So this is essentially the position of the Supreme Lord. Now, coming back, after this creation, it's described that, you can pull the verse again, sorry. It's described that Lord Brahma, of course, he didn't feel pleasure, and therefore he purified himself. You can go up, just a translation. He purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead before moving on to another creation. So again, just to expand on that same point I was making, he felt contaminated even just by, creating this. Even if in this direct instant he wasn't, in this instance he might not have been directly affected by it, he still felt contaminated and felt the need for purification just in creating it, which is what brings him to meditation on the Supreme Lord. And of course, we understand that this is to every act that a devotee, the actions of the pure devotee are also meant to guide other living entities in their devotional service. So we understand that, of course, by meditation on the Supreme Lord, as we do with practically every aspect of our sadhana, is so that we can rise as proper meditation on Krishna. Later on, in some different parts of the Bhagavatam, we see Lord Brahma being subject to his own creations by interaction with them, like in the event that he was attracted to his own daughter upon creating her. Even though he doesn't grossly engage in that act of sex, the thought comes, and of course the sages end up calling him out on this, saying, hey, how are you going to guide the living entities, and this is how you're acting. If they're going to follow in your footsteps, you better act right. We see it with Lord Brahma being unable to recognize Krishna. Of course, again, the purpose of these events are to show how the living entities should properly act. So, again, Lord Brahma, despite this, nevertheless, these events and whatnot that take place, the understanding is that the pure devotee still, despite all this, can never fall down. And the reason for that, of course, is that they're always taking shelter of Krishna. Prabhupada once said that he was never subject to fall down. I'm paraphrasing here. In essence, he said, I can never fall down. And a devotee later on saw him praying to the deities that he never falls down, and this is ultimately why, because he never forgets Krishna. But when we start to forget him and we try to act separately from him, then we're always subject to be overcome by this contamination of the material laws of nature. So that's all I'm going to cover for now. If anybody has any questions, comments, there's about 5 minutes left. Corrections.
There's a lot. I'll mention one main thing. This is quite an amazing verse with a lot of depth in it, and especially the purport. Main point I was thinking of here was Lord Brahma's carrying out his duty, even though it's not very pleasurable.
Yeah.
And the relation to that in all of our services. And that can always go two ways. For example, we may get into a particular service that we don't like initially, and in this case, Brahma is having to put the conditioned souls into illusion. And we may get into particular services that may not be very palatable, or it may be very difficult, and we may not find much pleasure in. But if we're not able to remember Krishna in that activity, two things can kind of happen. Well, one thing, we just get frustrated and it becomes very difficult to perform. The other thing, we can actually become attracted by that same activity, because over time you can become conditioned by that mode, and you can start to try to find sense pleasure in that activity.
Yeah.
So if we're not remembering Krishna throughout those activities, just like sometimes on book distribution, we're having to, in certain places, we're having to act or do certain things it's not very pleasurable to do actually at all. Sometimes you're just, it's just a situation. They have to get, somehow or other, get Prabhupada's mercy in the form of his books, and you're having to do certain actions that are just like, oh man, this is not very good. But if we're not cautious in remembering that this is for the pleasure of Krishna, not for my own pleasure, then we may start to take pleasure in it ourselves somehow or other, in some perverted form. That's the nature of the living entity in his conditioning. So really amazing that therefore he purified himself by a meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I was thinking that that's exactly, again, principles of Bhagavad-gītā. You fight, but you do it in consciousness of me.
Right.
Remembering me at all times, you do it. So previous to this verse, Brahmā speaks about how he created frustration in the living entities. And again, frustration goes back to trying to find sense pleasure within that service that's meant to sometimes be done out of duty. But we can find pleasure in it by remembering Krishna, that going, okay, this is not ideally how I would want to be serving Krishna, but because this is what's been designated to me, I should do it. And remembering Krishna, and remembering at every moment that I'm not the enjoyer of this. I was just thinking about that in terms of my own experience on book distribution just recently, and just different services and all of that.
Sorry, to that point. I was gonna say, I was thinking about this the other day. It's so easy. Like if I have like a moment where I'm not engaged in service and I'm not consciously I have to consciously okay, this is for Krishna. I have to engage in my service. This is what's bringing pleasure to Guru. But it's like thinking of sense gratification is completely and totally second nature. It's just the minute you're just not engaged, it's it's not something I have to strive to do. It's just it automatically just comes, unfortunately. So, anyways, I just wanted to. It made me think about that because again, if we let that carry on, however, then like you said, we start we become attached to service maybe for the wrong reasons, and we start trying to find some sort of sense enjoyment in that. Which again is really dangerous, because the whole point of performing a service is that we become purified by it, and at that point that we lose that purifying element if we're not careful. So, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Krishna. Okay.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. Śrīmad Bhagavatam ki jai. Loknath Goswami ki jai.